Senator.
All right.
Thank you for coming
Oops,
on,
I'm
sir.
a little hot here.
You. I think I turned it down some. We should be good now. Senator Briggs Hopson is our guest. He, of course, chairs the Senate Appropriations Committee. So right now you guys have been talking about more related to getting the money in besides sending it out on the appropriations side. You passed legislation. We were just reviewing it. Passed legislation yesterday, essentially inserting the Senate bill plus Senator Sparks' PERS package, essentially, in the tax bill.
Correct.
That was sent over by the House, and the House sort of did the reverse of that. They put their language in the bill you guys sent over to them. Break it down. Where's all this going? I mean, we've been talking about all the details. Where do you think this goes now?
Well, let me just back up and say we took the Senate bill and we took a tax elimination proposal that has triggers and guardrails and things we thought were very fiscally responsible. We spent a lot of time saying that we don't want to do anything that's going to wreck the state. We want to make sure that as we work our way towards tax elimination, income tax elimination, that we did it in a very responsible way. And I think that's what we did. We did include, as you said, the retirement plans that Senator Sparks handles, which includes a Tier 5. And let me be super clear for our listeners here. I've already had 2 calls today, one on the way over here this morning, Gerard, from a friend who's in the system. And I said, don't worry. You will not be affected by this at all. This would only be for new employees. And then there was an ORP portion, the optional retirement plan, that would deal with primarily just IHL, a few, a couple of universities. So it's not going to have a big impact statewide, but it would certainly affect some that are in the retirement system with IHL.
Yeah. And
that's future also.
Yeah.
Future also.
Now, I don't think, honestly, that this is an exclusive solution to the PERS problem, but it stops the bleeding. I think that's the most important thing. So new employees in state government in the public sector would enroll in this new Tier 5 as opposed to the broken Tier 4.
Yeah, I had this discussion also with somebody else this morning about some of the things that happened back in the 90s that we're paying for now as a state. And, decisions were made, I'm assuming, on the best information they had at the time. I've heard stories about why they did it. Obviously, one of those was going up to a 3% COLA. The second one was moving into 2 times the amount on the top 4 years from a 1.8% rate. So both of those have caused enormous stress, financial stress on our system. And what we've done now, it's not that anybody wants to do it, Gerard. You can appreciate this.
Sure.
It's that something has to be done. You can either ignore the problem and just hope somebody fixes it down the road, or you can go ahead and attack the problem. And I think that's what we've tried to do in the Senate.
We've ignored it long enough. And every day we ignore it, it gets more expensive to fix. So.
And look, let me add this. For anyone that's in the retirement system or contemplating retirement in the system, beware that if you don't do something to fix it, you're going to be left in a situation where maybe you don't get the retirement you want. Everybody said, don't touch the retirement system. Please, Briggs, don't touch the retirement system. But at the same time, I also want to say we've got to make some corrections for future employees, or otherwise your retirement system may be affected because of nothing that anybody does. It's just going to happen because the thing starts going underwater.
Senator Briggs Hopson's been our guest. Thanks a lot. We're coming right back, folks. Mississippi, we're chatting with Senator Briggs Hopson. Going to continue the discussion. Then we're going to bring in Representatives Jonathan McMillan and Clay Manziel. All right, so, Senator, before we went to break, we were just doing a quick breakdown of the Senate tax legislation. And key differences, and I'll get you to respond. The first is the Senate does not increase the general sales tax. The House bill does 7 to 8% over 2 years. Little change from the original writing, the original draft, which would have taken it to 8.5%. You guys have an increase in the excise tax on fuel, 3 cents over 3 years, up to 9 cents additional. The House a little more bold in that respect, with 5 cents converted from a 5% sales tax to 5 cents per year over 3 years. But I'd say the big focus again on the top line, headline aspect of the legislation, the income tax. The House bill phases that out essentially over 10 years, beginning in 2028, I believe, is when it starts that process, taking it to 3, 5, and 27, then over 10 years. No triggers whatsoever. The Senate bill, this is what I want you to talk about, takes it down initially over 3 years, but then stops it there and says, okay, any future cuts we do with triggers.
Yeah. Well, first of all, let's talk about what we originally passed in the Senate, and that was a guaranteed tax cut no triggers, no. It was really, really easy to explain.
A cut, but not full elimination.
Correct. We were going down. Obviously, as most listeners know, we're already on the path to a 4% tax, income tax. We were taking it down to 3%, actually 2.99%. So there would be no sales tax increase. There would be the 3 cents per year, 3-year gas tax increase, and the income tax would work its way down to 2.99. We thought that was very easy to explain, very easy to understand, and we also felt like, Gerard, we've shown, our history shows that we'll continue to go down if the government and the economy bears it. So we felt like it was responsible all the way around, and no offense to the House plan where you just march your way down without regard to the conditions around you so much. I mean, they did have some things in there, but not to the extent where felt like we could go to that place, we could stop and look at it. Now, what we came back with on this married proposal yesterday was leaving that in and then using the triggers. And the main trigger in there is based on the difference between, or the delta between, what we had in a percent of revenue versus a percent of appropriations. And depending on what that number is, and roughly in the low 400 million range, if there's that kind of difference between appropriations and revenue and what we're spending, we would work anywhere from a 0.2, 0.25, or 0.3% decrease. So it would vary. You couldn't say it was going to go down a certain amount of the rate. Yeah. Correct. So we felt like that would ensure that we kept appropriations in check, but we also were looking at our revenue features. And, you never know what's going to happen. You could have something catastrophic happen that changes everything, and that way it would put a freeze on the tax elimination. But if times were good, you would certainly step down towards eliminating the income tax.
Yeah. So the difference is that the House doesn't have that sort of requirement. It just starts to phase out the income tax over that 10-year period and equal 10% of the rate increments, so to speak. So,
and I didn't see what they passed on Senate Bill 3095. They obviously, as you mentioned earlier, amended our plan, and they passed something else that I have not seen. That came off the floor yesterday. I did hear that they incorporated some of the things that we had, but largely went back to what their original House bill was.
Okay, so final question for you as the Appropriations Chair in the Senate. You hear this as well as I. What about cutting spending? What can we do there to eliminate some spending to give us more room to cut taxes?
Well, the first thing that I want to talk about, if I can, before I answer that, is you should know, the listeners should know that many agencies, and we're used to this. The old saying was, look, the good news is that, or the bad news sometimes you start with, is the agency's asking for $1 billion over what we have in revenue. The good news is the same $1 billion as last year. That was the old saying we had. Now it was gone from $2 billion, from $1 billion to $2 billion. But I mean, the fact of the matter is, we've got some agencies that we're always looking away and have shaved off money in various things, and we're looking at ways to pull back some parts of the government where we feel like we've given them things, some tools to meet their mission, but then we may have to cut some things back. Other thing that I have to tell people is, we've got three federal lawsuits that we're dealing with. People forget about that, and they're obligations that we're going to have to meet as a state to get out of those lawsuits. Child Protective Services is one of those. They've got some significant needs, and I don't want to get into details now, but I can give you an earful about some things with CPS. We've got DOC, Department of Corrections lawsuits, several of those. If you look at our deficit appropriation, we're paying attorneys, really large sums of money to take care of these lawsuits. And finally, we've got, first in CPS, the Olivia Wise settlement, and then we've got a mental health case that's pending right now. So there are some things that we can't ignore, and then the big 800-pound gorilla is what's going to happen with Medicaid at the federal level. Something we totally don't. It's out of our control.
No doubt.
Depending on what they do at the federal level, that could affect the state budget to hundreds of millions of dollars. But we're always trying to keep it lean and mean. And as you've seen, even with the revenue increases we've had, the only real big expense we've had in the last few years is the revised funding formula for education. That was about a $240 million hit. But other than that, it's basically trying to keep up with a few inflationary items.
Gotcha.
We did have a few pay raises in that inflationary period, but obviously the cost of eggs and milk and so forth are going up for not only for our agencies, but also for employees.
Appreciate it, Senator. Great.
Yeah, thank you. Always good to see you.